Welcome to Chaos2Cured podcast. This is Kirk Patrick Miller. You are here with myself and my co-host Jeffrey Freed. So we have covered a lot of these topics, but we wanted to do just a specific series on neurodivergent minds. So, the first one that just pops into our head, and we're going to jump right on it, is autism. The spectrum. I don't like the ASD. The D I'm going to leave out. So autism is a spectrum mental health issue where individuals are often seen as low functioning or maybe unable to maybe fit into society, or as a problem maker in school or in classes. They're interrupting. We'll get into some of the things that are characteristic of it, and then what it is, what we do to help people that are dealing with it. So Jeffrey, you are a world-renowned expert on dealing and helping individuals with autism. So why don't you walk some people through, and then you can jump back to me and I'll add my thoughts on it. But what would be characteristic? This is not to help people diagnose. Please seek an expert for that. But what are some things that you see that are very common?
Okay, I will jump right into that. Um, People who are, I'm not going to cover the really early years because um, it's really hard to diagnose when a kid is, 2 or 3 or 4 years old. And the sad part is that's when you want to catch it. But there's a
Absolutely.
whole other side to this, and that is there's a lot of strains too. Autistic people generally have great visual memories when they focus really well. They tend to be more honest than other people. Kind of shoot from the hip verbally, and they tend to really like to gravitate towards something. It could be pretty much. It could be a love of automobiles. It could be the weather. That's a big one. People on the spectrum, for some reason, love the Weather Channel and love weather. A lot of them love trains. I have one autistic little boy that I work with in Tokyo had the entire Tokyo. He was 6. Entire Tokyo subway system memorized and could get anyone anywhere, and he just did it in his head. He was a savant, and not all people on the spectrum are savants, but they generally have unbelievably powerful senses. They pick up so much from the environment that they really have trouble attending to one or two of those things because they're picking up so much. Their sense of smell can be very strong. Their sense of touch, feel, ability to pick up signals, sort of nonverbal signals from people, can be too much. Hearing's a big one. A lot of the people that I've worked with say they can hear the lights, and they can hear them humming, and it can get so loud that it can interrupt their processing. So it's not a good thing. Um, they tend to be extremely smart. Not all people on the spectrum are brilliant, but a lot of them are. And they can be very successful because they have a different learning style. They have this holistic um, learning style where they see the patterns quicker than other people do, neurotypical people do. And they can be brilliant. Their ability to focus, their ability to see patterns, and naturally leads to people on the spectrum becoming very successful entrepreneurs and such. The weakness is that they're so sensitive to stimuli in the environment that they become overwhelmed, don't know what to pay attention to, and the world can be a very abrasive, cacophonous place. So they shut down. It's involuntary. So I've been told sometimes it's voluntary, which is really interesting, but mostly it's involuntary. And they like ritualistic behaviors like counting steps to the school or always getting up and doing the same thing over and over again. They love routine. And that's because when you are bombarded by stimuli and the world is such a chaotic place, you have to turn it into something that you can deal with. So what you do is you just put one foot in front of the other, you become rigid, and you try to you focus real well. Problem with that is when you shut down and focus on one thing, you miss a lot. And it's also a red herring because people who have autistic children or work with autistic children usually believe that they can't read people, they can't read social situations, they're very rigid and inflexible, and all they're viewing is that person's defense mechanism. What I'm saying is autism, there's a lot of genetics to it for sure, but what happens is the person with autism is so sensitive that they have to shut down and pay attention to only one thing, or what happens is they become overwhelmed, scared, sick, etc. It's very difficult being autistic, but it can be very rewarding because the strengths can be amazing. So many people, Bill Gates, autistic. The guy Richard Branson from Virgin Atlantic, autistic. Charles Schwab, supposedly autistic. And many, many more people in history, like Winston Churchill, General George Patton. Um, they were never tested, but they exhibited huge aspects of autism. Nicholas Tesla is another one. Alexander Graham Bell. The list goes on and on. And they have changed the world. So people with autism who survive a shamed, that because you're going to get shamed. People, you're different, and people tend to make fun of or not take seriously people who are eccentric. And when somebody can push through that, they can accomplish amazing things. But I really feel that most people get destroyed. They just think they're inadequate. They don't know what's wrong with them. They never even get close to feeling their strengths. And that's a tragedy for not just them, but for all of us, because there's a lot of Bill Gates, there's a lot of Charles Schwab's, there's a lot of Branson from Virgin Atlantic who never get a chance to shine.
You know, when you go through that, one of the first people that pops into my head is Albert Einstein.
Yeah, you
One of
forgot
the
about that.
one of the things he loved to do was mental exercises or mental visualizations. I think he called them thought experiments. I don't want to be incorrect, so people can check me on that, but I'm not sure if that's the exact phrasing. But he would go inside his head and work through physics problems. It's the profound ability of people on the spectrum that was the first thing you went to. And I really want everybody to pay attention to the first thing Jeffrey went to as a world renowned expert on autism was the strengths, what they bring to the table that a lot of people discount. And one of the big ones that you brought up was the inability to feel others, you know, I guess their emotional
Yeah, they're feeling.
sensing or their social boundaries. And what I would like to say is a lot of the individuals that I have worked with that are on the spectrum, not only do they feel those emotions, but if they're watching like a TV show and there's an uncomfortable situation, oftentimes that discomfort makes them either put on earphones, plug their ears. They want to shy away from it because, as you've repeated in the past, and you always give credit to Temple Grandin, she says people on the spectrum feel things more. So if they're watching a social interaction that is truly embarrassing, like think of the sitcom or Meet the Parents with Ben Stiller and I can't remember Robert De Niro, those some of those scenes are truly embarrassing. They're hard to watch, and they feel so much discomfort. They hide. They'll move away from it. They feel it more. Definitely the lights. So you hit a lot of the angles where a lot of people, for me, if you're looking at young ages and stuff like that, if the child is having massive explosions because it's a Sunday and you go to church, it's not necessarily the church. Maybe it's the clothing you have to wear. As you and I've talked about in the past, wearing a button-down shirt with it's just horrific for me. Anything that closes off my throat. So hypersensitivity to sound, to light, to I mean, my goodness, the stimulation in this
Oh,
environment is
a lot of the people I work with.
off the roof.
complain about the smells. People wearing perfume
Yes.
makes their eyes water. A lot of times they will certain foods because they taste too strongly. Many times they can't sit in a cafeteria or a restaurant because the sounds and smells of people salivating, which nobody else picks up, makes them nauseous. And they don't know what's wrong with it. Just assume something's wrong with them, that they're broken. And
Yes.
we need to break that. We need to break that because it's not true. You get better with age or worse, depending on how you look at it. But I actually mean better. You learn strategies. You don't go to big events like a AFC championship game or a basketball game in a confined area. You just don't do it. Or you don't go to Disney World or Disneyland and do all that stuff because
It's
it's
overwhelming.
brutal. And that's when a young child will have a panic attack or a breakdown. And any autistic parent of autistic children will know they already know all this stuff. You just avoid that. There's so many people on the spectrum now the numbers are growing, and it's not just a question of um, more recognition. So people are looking for it. There are more people on the spectrum now. It's not 5% or 2%. It's much higher than that. So, like some theaters have autistic friendly showings. Um, you can go to some like amusement parks and that are autistic friendly. So it's getting better and there's much more recognition. But the way autistic people have been treated in the past is a disgrace. It's better,
Agreed.
but it is just, there are stories out there that'll curl your hair. Um, but like I said, it's the best thing you can do is learn about the characteristics of people on the spectrum. There aren't. I mean, it's not that hard. They're not that esoteric. The characteristics, and they're pretty common. Learn about them and modify them. It's like take advantage of shows that are autistic friendly. Make sure that when you go shopping that you have your child with you and that you only get clothes that the child approves of, that don't scratch or itch or make them feel like they're choking. Um, Give them the foods that they want. If it becomes a problem of unhealthiness, get some vitamins in there. Be creative. Um, and it tends to lower the misery index for both the kid and the parent. And if your child stares off into space when they're 2, 3 years old, and when you call their name, they don't pay attention, they're inside themselves. They're basically visualizing some scene, and their abilities to visualize are so much better than most people that they literally get lost in their daydreams. And many times they produce some um, amazing results. They can build Legos in their head. They can design all kinds of machines or potential machines, cars, because they don't lose the image. That's one of the beautiful characteristics about being visual. You can hold mental images so much longer than can most people. It gives you a unique advantage.
You mentioned a couple other things that people should kind of pay attention to. One is the passion. So when they have a specific passion for, you know,
Yeah, it's
whether
true.
it's writing or whether it's music, or if they have a passion, they will look for people they can share that with. And what they are looking for is people to listen. They are not looking for people to give them advice, tell them what's right, tell them what's wrong.
Hmm.
They're honestly looking for people to share their excitement with. That is such a endearing quality, and it's such a beautiful thing. But we live in a society where everything is measured by time. So
Hmm.
when they're in a class and they have this amazing point to bring up, what the teacher sees and what other classmates see is someone going into this long diatribe.
Good
And
word.
what they miss is that this is a they're trying to, I guess, illuminate all of the other students in a thought process that helps bring everybody together. And that's the pattern recognition that you were talking about before. They see that. The issue that I notice most is in a traditional school setting, in a traditional family setting, traditional church setting, you name it. A traditional setting, you don't have time to let people go off on a tangent, even if that tangent is actually really valuable. The only time that happens is stand-up comedy, where you let somebody go off on like a 45-minute show and they bring it back to a circular joke right at the beginning. Some of
Yeah.
those patterns, by the way, that you see in stand-up comedy, people on the spectrum can instantaneously spot. So the pattern recognition is spectacular. And there's all of these strengths. And some of the things you mentioned are very, very vital for people to understand. One, love the child, support the things they're passionate about, because if they're passionate about it, they will actually put in way more effort than anybody else realizes. They will run with that. That's a big one. Nutrition, as we mentioned before, that definitely uh, hypersensitive. So texture based, sound based. If you make a food that doesn't sound very pleasant, if it slops around, I promise you they probably won't want it.
Hmm.
That's how I am as well with OCD. So for my neurodiversity, I fit some other things that are very similar, pattern based. Um, they definitely go into lists. That is very interesting to me. So, and I feel like these lists are made because there's a time structure put in place for them. You have to tell me everything in 5 minutes or 2 minutes or 30 seconds. And so what they do is they start building lists for people that are linear and sequential. So I like, what did you do today? I did this, I did this, I did this, I did this, I did. I mean, it's a just a cascading list, right? And that's not really how they even necessarily think. A lot of the individuals I work with, if you give them a thing of Legos, they'll look at the whole manual for maybe 4 seconds and they'll just start and they'll jump to step 5. And you're like,
Yeah.
why did you start with that one? Well, because if I do step 5, then 1, 2, 3, 4, I can do all together. And
Mm-hmm.
you're like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. So, the pattern recognition that you brought up, the passions, those are all the strengths. And we hear a lot of the stigmas on the weakness. So I want to kind of end a few of those. One, the fact that they can't learn or can't deal with social situations, absolutely not true. The key part is, like you said, early recognition and early intervention. If you hop in there and you get somebody like Jeffrey to help your child see their value, to build up confidence, to let them realize that being different is actually a strength. And also, the other thing that Jeffrey did with me that was so helpful was point out some of the skills I had that would be needed. So, some of the things that we all have to go through, it doesn't matter if you're neurodiverse or I don't like neurotypical because there's no such thing as a typical or normal, but
More
so
typical.
exactly, I guess more towards what we would think of as just a typical individual. So when you get towards that, you know, there's a lot of similarities that are missed. And for me, the people that are on the spectrum get very complex issues very fast, get bored quickly.
Yeah,
They need to be engaged.
they also have trouble with easy. Easy's hard, hard is easy. Um,
Absolutely.
it's not the time or the place to talk about why that is. I know why that is, but that's essentially for another podcast.
Well, the idea, I know there's a lot of parents out there that and teachers out there that are dealing with someone that's on the spectrum. And a lot of times you see explosions or impatience, interruptions, frustrations. A lot of that stuff is due to them putting an extreme amount of pressure on themselves and feeling like they have to be absolutely perfect at everything else because they already notice they're different and they're trying to adapt. And so what we need is a more patient culture.
Good
And
luck.
that is the hardest thing is so one of the biggest things that I advocate for parents to teach individuals on the spectrum is to remain calm,
Oh
to
yeah.
just not react. If you don't react, think about it. And you've mentioned this before. Do you want to give some parents and some family members some tips on just some things that can help an individual with that's dealing with, that impulsivity, that rush to answer out of, in my opinion, fear, because they don't want to forget it. They want to share it with the world.
Want to get it out before they lose it. Yeah.
Yes.
Um, the main thing to do as a parent is what you just said, is to be very non-judgmental, because they're very, very aware of criticism, because again, they have all the senses that everyone else does, just more of the same. So criticism is, you have to phrase it differently, being tough and saying try harder. You don't do that. You make the whatever it is you're trying to teach them, you just make it a little bit easier. You use praise, and once they learn to trust you, they'll take risks. But when you feel everything more than other people, when you're criticized or you're shamed, you won't come out of your shell for a while. Somebody listening to this is thinking, well, the world doesn't work out that way. And yeah, that's true, but you're not worried about that, right? You want to get them gradually to a place where they can survive in a tough world, and they can, but it's a gradual process. Um, and the parent needs to really listen to the kid and tell the kid to put their thoughts into words. A lot of times they have trouble with putting them into words because they think in images. And when you think in images, and maybe three-dimensional images, it's really hard to turn it into words, particularly when you're a little kid. Um, but when they're a little bit older, have them write down their thoughts or verbalize their thoughts and allow them processing time. Because one of the big things is, if you can get them to put their thoughts and feelings into words, you can operate on it. You can work with that. So that's a big one. And learn as much as you can about autism. There's lots of great books out there. Temple Grandin's awesome. There's other books by a woman named Donna Williams, um, which are tremendous. There's some good stuff out there. It's coming out, and there's also some good podcasts and videos on TikTok, Facebook, places, Instagram. Look at them. Learn a lot about it. Read about it, and it's going to be so much easier for both you and your kid.
One thing that you mentioned in a previous, and you've mentioned this multiple times, which was to never let them give up. And that's one of my favorite things that you've ever said.
Because we want to reward effort. Whenever you see your child trying, don't de-emphasize the results and emphasize the effort. Because if they're trying, they will be successful. Because many of them are so smart.
Well, and for people that are wondering, you just use Google and search up genetic links and studies between intelligence and autism. You're going to find a whole bunch of literally studies that show there's a direct correlation between intelligence and autism. So somebody on the spectrum is typically, in my opinion, I feel like a lot of the ones that we consider in layman's terms, in my opinion, low functioning. I feel like there are untapped potential. And for me, my entire goal really is for people to start realizing what these people offer. And if they do survive, I want this to be said, they don't just survive, they thrive, because trying to survive on a daily basis when everything is attacking you, the lights are something I hated at school. The brightness of them was intense. The school clothing, luckily I went to a public school, so I pretty much wore the same t-shirt for like 4 years, and that is something that a lot of people will understand. It was comfortable. But when you deal with a constant feeling of failure, of that you're different,
But you're
you don't do well in
disappointed.
school. Yeah. The school is not built for you. The school is built for people that follow step 1 through 10 and do it perfectly each step.
Mhm.
And they want to do step 10 first because it looks interesting. It's a different setup. And so that brings a lot of feelings of failure. So it's very important to make sure your child does not feel like they are a failure. They are different. And different is not bad. Different means you have a different skill set, a different weakness set, and you work on all of those the same. It's not any different. So I really want everybody out there that is worried and stuff like that, just understand if you love them. And like you said, discipline, this was really important. I wanted to bring this back up. If you criticize them and you say, how dare you do that? I'm so disappointed in you. You failed at this. That is pretty much like telling somebody that is, again, I don't like the word neurotypical, but it's a scientific term right now. If you tell them that, they're going to be like, oh, okay, I'll try harder. I didn't practice hard enough. I didn't work hard enough on my schoolwork, whatever the case might be. If you tell that to somebody on the spectrum, it's like their world just ended.
And they're going to go inside. They're going to go inside.
Exactly. They will. So it is very important to understand they are trying 100% of the time to please the people that are around them and that they love. And that really needs to be said. So be gentle with them. They are going to be different. They are going to be a handful at times. I was an extreme pain for my family at many junctures throughout my life, but I think everybody that knows me would say it was worth it.
Yeah.
So that is the key part. Keep loving them. Is there any closing statements you want to make on this at all?
No, I feel from my part, I absolutely covered and said what I wanted to say.
I really loved the show. We will continue this with a specialty each week as we go through this. So please feel free to reach out to us if there's anything we don't cover or anything you have questions about. Jeffrey, thank you so much for joining me and always being just a delight in this world.
Thank you.
So everyone have a beautiful week. Bye. Thank you so much for listening to Chaos2Cured podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please share it with everyone you know. And definitely like, follow, and subscribe. Certainly leave a comment if you'd like. Let us know what you'd like us to talk about the next time. Also, in our show notes, there should be direct links where you can follow us on our social media, as well as reach out to us directly. Thanks again, and have a great day. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed on Chaos2Cured podcast are the speaker's own. All discussion is based on our own experiences. We do not and cannot guarantee the accuracy or completeness of any information. Chaos2Cured podcast cannot give medical or health advice. All discussion is based upon our personal experiences and meant for general and educational purposes. This podcast is not a substitute for professional help or for diagnostic purposes for yourself or another. Chaos2Cured podcast always encourages you to consult an appropriate professional.